sister in power. How are you? It's so good
What?
to see you.
Good to see you. I miss
It is.
you.
It's been a day, my sister, but I wasn't gonna miss the opportunity to break bread with you and the fam. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here for the first hour, but excited to be here now.
Never apologize. You get here when you're supposed to. Rachel Bittecofer is here as well. Political strategist, political scientist, analyst. We were talking about the midterm. She's over the moon. She's joyful.
Yes.
And some people are like, no, Stacey lost. The world is coming to an end. Chris Jones lost. Charles Booker lost. All these people lost. How are you
Yeah.
feeling?
Well, I know Karen, Sister Rachel, I think I follow you on Twitter. Love your work. Everything you've said is always highly intellectual. So my first time meeting you, but full respect. Now, Karen, I love you. I know that you have one of your defining characteristics is that you are a realist and your audiences expect realism from you. So from the realist lens of analyzing the midterms, we need to be judicious in our disappointment because I love Chris Jones. He is a superior human being, and nobody thought he was going to win. I love I love Charles Booker. I think he's remarkable progressive. Shame on you if you're disappointed because you thought Charles Booker was going to win. We have to manage our expectations for the sake of preservation of our hearts to this thing in some degree. And I'll even say, listen, Mandela Barnes is a personal friend of mine. He and I go back before anybody knew what he was. And he had the presence of mind to grab the screen name, The Other Mandela, which I thought was pretty dope. We go way, way back to college. And I love Mandela, but in the last 45 days, it became apparent that he had a very, very difficult hill to climb. So I ain't disappointed in those. I'm proud of them for taking those, courageous odysseys, but I ain't think they was gonna win, right?
Okay.
Um, and so then when you look to a Sherry Beasley or a Val Demings, I would throw
Right.
Mandela in there as well. It was closer, and we're a little bit sadder. We're a little bit more disappointed. Even when you look at a Stacey Abrams, top tier candidates who are good and decent and qualified people in any classical sense, but are victims of the South and are victims of the moment and are victims of sexism, victims of racism. Are shouldering the burdens of multiple different divisions of hate vested upon them. These are superior candidates and, frankly, superior people who did not get past the threshold against far inferior candidates and, frankly, far inferior people. There's no real discussion that Ted Budd belongs in a circle of intellects that Sherry Beasley, the Honorable Sherry Beasley, sits in. If you argue for Ted Budd in that discussion, you're not a serious person. If you argue that Marco Rubio is a serious person as opposed to Val Demings and her husband, who are remarkable, then you're not a serious person. If you argue that Sarah Huckabee Sanders has any business other than carrying Dr. Chris Jones's briefcase, and by the way, the only person more brilliant than Dr. Chris Jones in the state of Arkansas is his
It's
black
his
ass,
wife.
locked ass, brilliant doctor, combat medical veteran ass wife, who is Captain America, right?
Oh,
And so that's part of what we can get into if we had the time, Karen. That
we
you
got
really
time.
think
We got
about
time.
you really think about how Democrats have to go about being superior human beings. Like you got to be T'Challa in order to compete with Jethro. And that's literally what you see in a Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp type situation. Brian Kemp, listen, no human being can be born in America and expect to be more educated than Stacey Abrams is today. Brian Kemp has a bachelor's degree in agriculture from Big State U. You understand? Um, and in a universe where only 25% of Americans have bachelor's degrees, that's cool. Brian Kemp is, hey, he may be an expert in his field of public affairs by years of experience, but Brian Kemp has a bachelor's degree in agriculture from the University of Georgia. Stacey is summa cum all world in every category in multiple different spaces and phases. She is an incredibly accomplished human being, and we will never get that facial credit, right? That an average white man will get. And that is the hill we climb every day. And so, with that as a much broader, much larger context, I think we can really appreciate and temper our disappointment, but appreciate the victories that we did have. Joe
Okay.
Biden did a great job in mitigating history and what history has typically done to first term presidents. Jamie Harrison should never buy a beer or a burger anywhere he goes because he effectively coordinated resources across this country. The brilliant, the peerless Wendy Wallace. Remember the name, America. Wendy Wallace, Chief Operating Officer of the Democratic Governors Association, veteran Black woman, political operator, brilliant sister, one of the chief strategists of her time. Wendy Wallace orchestrated dramatic victories across the board for Democratic governors. Tony Evers, who was supported by Mandela Barnes's blackness, even as it hurt him own self in Wisconsin. You got a Tony Evers. That's Wendy Wallace's handiwork. You have a holding the Democratic governor's office in the state of Kansas. That's Wendy Wallace's handiwork. You've got winning in Pennsylvania to the point where their guy, we don't even know who he was. He wasn't competitive with your man, Dr. Oz. That's Wendy Wallace's handiwork, a brilliant Black woman strategist here based in Washington, D.C. So we can appreciate those wins once we get over the ones that we probably shouldn't have been too disappointed about, or at least not surprised by in the first place.
Okay. And I'm going to put a pin on Jamie Harrison because Rachel,
don't do that.
Sherry Beasley, Don brought up, and I want to be educated. I want to be fair too. So let me just say that I'm willing to lean into what you're saying, Don Calloway. Sherry Beasley was winnable. And I don't think the DNC spent any time bolstering her campaign. She lost by less than a couple of 100,000 votes. She won over a million. That was very close. I think 47% she got. That was a winnable race that they didn't put any energy into. Was it because they didn't see an opportunity for victory there? It's a purple state now.
Am I responding to that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good.
you are,
Rachel.
Rachel.
Respond to that. I want to respond to the last thing that the last caller mentioned. And I want to talk about Jamie Harrison and the DNC, guys, okay? Especially because I'm talking to the Black community today. Jamie Harrison is the best
30%. Wait, hold on. Let me just give you some numbers. 30% of our listeners happen to be melanemic. So I need you to know that too. So it's not,
it doesn't matter to me. I'm
going to tell you
Black. The same thing.
But they're Black too.
Jamie Harrison is the best fucking chair we've ever had of the DNC. Okay. And the DNC does not run campaign strategy. Okay. The RNC does. And this is a conversation that we need to have about that. Right. And I'm definitely interested in talking to Don off air. Okay. But the DNC does not do that. Okay. The DNC, as the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison was tasked with two things predominantly. Put people in a position to beat back a midterm effect, taking a job that you are fucking destined to lose. You are destined to fail, okay? When I started this job 2 years ago, I knew I would fail. I knew it, but I did it anyway. So did Stacey Abrams. So did Jamie Harrison. So did Beto O'Rourke. And we cannot fault people who are willing to step in the toughest fucking arena just because they fall an inch short of what you needed, okay? Especially since we're talking about a situation where we should be waking. I know people don't feel joyous, but let me tell you, how would you feel today waking up? 50 seats in the House, Republican sweeps all the governorship. Everybody's talking about, will there even be a 24 election? What do you think is going to happen to the Black community in a fascist autocracy? It ain't good, okay? So you should be joyful because we are in the fight. We have a real potential now to save American democracy. And if we save it, it is going to be on a path of perfection, right? We're going to push that fucker right down the fucking hill, all the way to the things that we want. We want national abortion bans. We want a good Supreme Court, all the shit that we want. And you know how we get that? We get that by feeling our feels and then doing the hard work of winning a narrative, okay? And if I don't have the Black community around Jamie Harrison after he just did the impossible, and everyone's going to say it was Biden, but it was Jamie, okay? Man, it sucks, dude. And I just want people to understand when you're looking at a midterm effect, you don't do expansion maps. So if it had been 2018, these great candidates that you guys are talking about might have been able to get some love. I mean, Booker in Kentucky, probably. Sherry Beasley was heavily supported. Sherry Beasley's problem is that she ran for Senate in North Carolina with the North Carolina Democrats, not Jamie fucking Harrison. Okay. So
that's real.
And listen, one more thing, I'm going to tell you this. In 2018, when I first heard the name Sherry Beasley and looked her up, from a North Carolina insider. I said, that's the person you got to run in 18 on that Senate race, because the midterm fundamentals are going to be in our favor. And if we run a candidate, a talented Black candidate like that, who really inspires people, like in Georgia and other places, we will win that race, right? But I don't control nomination politics. And when people are making decisions about nominations, it often is resource based. It's, can this person raise $60 million to run a Senate race, right? Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
No, listen, you spitting fire. You spitting fire, and we need to understand the inherent racism in that nomination process, though, right? Yep. And the inherent sexism and yep. certainly the inherent heterosexism in that nomination process, because do we want leaders who have proximity to finance, or do we want leaders who have proximity to everyday people, right?
We want people to run for office that can win office. That's the only thing that matters.
I think that's some of it. I think that's some of it, but that gets you, old weirdo down in Arizona, she won office, right? And we had much higher expectations. I know you did. This is my first time seeing your face, but I know you from Twitter, and I know you had higher expectations of Senator in Arizona, right? And she's on our side of the ledger all day, every day, right? Should Democratic resources go to supporting a guy like a Joe Manchin, who can win office, but what do we get out of him, right? What do we get out of him?
Control and be able to confirm justices to the Supreme Court. Guys, if we lost Joe Manchin today, before this election,
we slide into fascism. I get that.
We would not be able to confirm a justice.
That's fair.
If Joe Manchin had defected in that year-long fiscal fight we had with him, okay, what would have happened immediately is that Mitch McConnell would have become the Senate Majority Leader, and Joe Biden and Justice Jackson Brown. Yep. Brown Jackson. I always do Jackson Brown. Sorry, I'm a music person. Anyway, she would not be sitting on the Supreme Court, guys. Okay, so we can't do shit without power. And honestly, it's all across the grassroots. It's not specific to any community. My work this last couple of years has been trying to teach people this basic premise. We cannot govern if we cannot win. And when I say that we want strong candidates, I meant Sherry Beasley. I meant
what I think I'm talking about,
candidates that are really charismatic, and they will raise the money if they're charismatic. So when I was agreeing with you, Don, if you don't want to recruit Cal Cunningham because he's connected and can raise money when he's a boring old white dude that can't win election, when you have somebody who's politically talented like Malcolm Kenyatta, right? You want to tap someone like that, put them, he's obviously sitting on the bench in Pennsylvania, right? But when his time comes, he's a young man, guys, and there's a bench, right? Yeah. When his time comes, it doesn't matter if he's got a Rolodex into the elite. What matters is that people are going to see what a great candidate is. He's going to believe in him, and he's going to become a fundraising mega person like Beto O'Rourke. So we need to be recruiting candidates that can win.
She's Rachel Bitecofer. He's Don Calloway. Go ahead, Don.
I think I don't really disagree with anything you're saying, but I went too far down that rabbit hole. What I really wanted to get to is that, and listen, I was a former elected, and I certainly didn't run to tap out at state rep, right? You run because you think there's a path to bigger and better things, particularly in a post-Obama era for a skinny Black dude with no facial hair. But I digress. The point here is that you understand what the realistic probability is of achieving statewide office nomination. That's down the ballot, not to mention governor. God bless Westmore, right? And so when you think about what are the realistic limitations placed upon Black people as potential statewide candidates, it is interesting to me that there is a tide shifting in favor of normalizing Black statewide candidates when within your and my professional careers, lifetimes, that has not always been the case. As Black people in this country, we understand that there is no free lunch. In fact, Robert Greene and the 48 Laws of Power tell us to despise the free lunch. So if I look around and see a Sherry Beasley and a Chris Jones and a Mandela Barnes and all the others all the way up and down the ballots whose names we might not even know, right? Who ran for Secretary of State nationwide or State Treasurer or Auditor nationwide. I have to take, I'm enough of a skeptic now in my old age to say, this is the first cycle since 1998 that I didn't professionally work. I'm enough of a skeptic now after those battles to say, why are we conceding these statewide nomination processes to Black people when white Democrats have never given us this stuff. Is it ultimately so we can position some extraordinary, talented, remarkable individual talents? Is it so that we can position them to drive out turnout, but not exactly support their races, not exactly give them marquee staff, not exactly give them the best consultants at a reasonable rate that they can work with, not exactly run through the wall to syndicate fundraising for them? Are we supporting these candidates? Did we fully support Sherry Beasley? Did we fully support Val Demings? Even though I have problems with Val Demings because she ran on that more centrist campaign platform, that police chief stuff, and I'm trying to get away from a lot of that in terms of our thinking overall. Did we really in our hearts fully support Mandela Barnes? Did we? When Tony Evers wins by that level of a margin, did we really listen to black consultants, or did we continue to run that D-trip bullshit, that DS bullshit that doesn't have enough input from people of color at the leadership level and from a controlling level such as donors? Because if you talk to me and my peoples, we're going to tell you how to win some of these races. If you and I sat down with Karen, we could figure it out. But the DNC and the mechanisms of democratic politics are still extraordinarily corporatized and patriarchal institutions. And we see that play out in how it shows up in final outcomes for some remarkable black candidates who are objectively superior human beings to their opposition.
Okay, but if you take Chris Jones and you throw him in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, any place like that, millions of fucking dollars coming in to support him. So, like, I know it looks bad that the DNC didn't come and build infrastructure around, Booker and Kentucky and these other places. But when you have, number one, we have a severe money disadvantage on the left compared to the right. We will talk about that sometime, but they have billionaires funding Mitch McConnell's able to pull all his shit out of Arizona because there was a billionaire willing to spend $30 million on Blake Masters. Okay. So we have a significant resource curse on our side, some in part because we've told corporate donors and large donors we don't want their money. Right. And you have, if you're Jamie Harrison and you're sitting on $100 million, okay, and you're running into a midterm effect, and your goal is to mitigate loss, no matter what the public posture is going to be, it's to mitigate loss because historically 50, 60 seats go, right?
That's right.
Then you have to be smart about where you put that money. And it is easy to sit here a kiss away from the House and hopefully maybe a buffer in the Senate and say, oh, well, shit, we should have just spent money all over the fucking place.
No.
I'm just going to wrap up real quick. But I want to say the reason that we're sitting this close to the House is because the money was spent strategically where it could most benefit a 50, a federal map. And it sucks because Val Demings and Sherry were both invested in heavily. But if you want to know the honest truth, the reason why we can't win in Florida and North Carolina is because we don't run the right strategy. You look at what they did in Michigan. They ran a pure negative partisanship strategy. It was all stakes frame, democratic emergency, loss of freedom. They ran it from the fucking top three all the way down to the state house and the state Senate. They flipped every fucking thing in the state on it. Okay. And there was never a conversation about Michigan being contentious, right?
I don't think,
but Michigan kept their governor though. So something good happened. I don't.
Rachel,
they kept everything and they flipped two chambers of the legislature in a midterm effect.
We've yet to disagree. I don't disagree with anything you're saying.
We're having a good talk.
Listen, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. But since we're on Karen's show, I'm gonna throw a little bit of tea out there and I'll back away from it.
Come on, Don.
Did Black Atlanta political leadership want Stacey to win? I don't know. They're not my friends. I don't talk to them. But hey, did Black political elected leadership in Atlanta?
Metro
Wakanda.
Okay. Did they want Stacey? You're asking a question. All right.
I'm gonna just ask. I'm gonna throw it out.
No, you're gonna throw it out. I'm gonna throw it out to the people. Because I know there's some people that know. Don's saying something that I think he knows the answer to. Did the Black, what'd you call it? The Black political
elected political leadership throughout the state of Georgia, but specifically located in Atlanta, want Stacey to win?
Did they want her to win? Let's just sit on that for a second.
We can sit with that or not. I'm just tossing.
Rachel, you've given me a lot personally to think about as I sit here. I want to be responsible with this audience. I want to be responsible with the people who listen to me. I trust your scholarship. You know what you're talking about. And I'm still wrestling with the Jamie Harrison piece simply because style is important, and maybe messaging is important, and maybe just having what you just said on the show in terms of strategy. But he was doing a lot of talking points when he was out there, to the point where I couldn't invite him back, especially after he didn't vote in his own primary. It was hard for me to have a conversation with him because I felt like I was on a loop of talking points and not having an honest conversation about strategy, which this audience, and I think is a little bit disrespectful, because you're saying, oh, y'all don't understand. We understand completely. What came out of your mouth makes perfect sense. And I can lean into that because we're all adults here who have working, functioning brains, and we can understand strategy and mitigating loss and all of those things, especially those actuarians out there who understand that. What you're saying was really powerful today. So I want to thank you for framing that, because it allows us to move forward to 2024. What do we have right now to do to ensure that we keep democracy before I let you go? I
do want to say quickly, like when I say y'all don't understand, I mean like all lay people who don't have a PhD in political behavior and spent, thousands of hours studying this shit. So I just want to be clear about that. Like I would have said the same line to any.
No, audience. I'm not taking offense at all. I wasn't even talking about
I just want to make sure that there's no ambiguity, because my relationship with the Black community better be fucking tight. I love you guys, and I 100% hear exactly Rachel. What you guys are saying. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying any of it's non-legitimate. I'm just trying to explain from the perspective of an expert, the complicated role of a DNC chair. Yes. Especially
that wasn't, I just said it was good. Let's
so when we talk about what to do going forward, guys, like my objective, I got to toe in this cycle. I was able to impact some strategy. I was able to fix some shit, but I'm not a DC insider by any means, right? But my goal is like, we're going to move forward. We're going to start to look at this party infrastructure that we have, this DNC, D-TRIP, DSC, DGA situation. We're going to look at how the Republican system operates compared to that, and start trying, I hope, to start advocate for some change there, right? Because like the problem that Jamie Harrison is suffering from, and Tom Perez before him, and Howard Dean before that. So it's not the DNC chair, it's the position of DNC chair. Mm-hmm. And I just really hope people will kind of take a second, maybe. I mean, when you have a settled opinion about something, it's very hard to reassess. But I do urge you guys to reassess, because we need leadership like Jamie is doing in the DNC if we want to reform that institution. And if he can't keep the support of the Black community, like that sucks, dude. We need Jamie Harrison to succeed. His success is our success. And I believe that he believes in us.
Well, then he needs to get a better message.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I feel like I told him, and then I didn't invite him back because I'm like, you stop with the talking points. I try, even off mic, stop. Like, just talk.
It's so the Democratic system sucks so much.
Yeah,
guys.
stop being politicians.
What you can say, he made a lot of reform in 2 years, and I know you guys can't see it, but I promise you will see it, and you should be able to see it in these midterm results as well.
All right, I'm gonna, lean back and, and make space and grace for everything that you're saying, because, this is the job. We want to win. Power is everything right now for us, because it's the only way the world gets healed is if we have power. So on that note, Rachel, thank you for always coming through. Appreciate you
giving me the time and attention, and also just being receptive to my nerdy analytical framework.
we love it. We love all of it. Thank you, Rachel Bitecofer. You can follow her
at
Rachel.
I'm so glad to meet you. Let's follow up, buddy.
Yeah.
For sure. Take care, Rachel. Pleasure.
All right. Bye.
Yes. Well, I was going to give out your information. All right. Well, because Don actually is a DC insider. You just said a word. And I'm still struggling. With Jamie Harrison, primarily because he can't get off his talking points enough to have a conversation. And, we need to understand, like what she's saying, Pam Keith, think tanks and lobbyists, which you are, like to understand how we wield power. And like you said, for them not to hire people like you in these key places, because you do know how to win. I mean, it's just like, to me, that there's this cliquey thing going on in Washington among Democrats, and it leaves most of us out because they think they know better, but they're not in them streets.
That's right. And the reality is that, if we're talking about long-term gains in the name of holistic equity for Black people and oppressed peoples, we have to be willing to sacrifice 3, 4, 5, 20 years of political cycles in order to build a fundamentally more equitable system. I mean, there are people who are not trying to defund the police. There are people who are putting serious thought and intellectual space into abolishing police. They should be heard. There are
Mhm.
people who are not trying to, you know, direct more money to the tax, or excuse me, to the social safety net. There are people who are trying to universalize the social safety net and really reimagine things fundamentally. If a Malcolm Kenyatta is ever going to get there, the brother who she mentioned up in Pennsylvania, I think
Mhm.
he's on the Philly side, state
Mhm.
rep, remarkably impressive young brother. If a Malcolm Kenyatta is ever going to get anywhere near the reins of power in our lifetimes, then it will be the result of a radical reimagination as opposed to uh, inching progress. There is a space and a place for incremental progress, but
Let
there
me
are
ask
those
you.
of us who look to revolutionize.
Let me. Why do the Republicans, the RNC, why are they strategists and the DNC are facilitators? Why isn't the DNC creating strategy as well, or at least deploying strategy? Why is there such a disconnect?
Well, the DNC is creating and deploying strategy. It's just not really a revolutionary strategy. Most people want polite reformation. Most people don't want a revolution. Because revolution is costly and it will challenge all of us. And so, when you see people like Fred Hammond, when you see people like Eldridge Cleaver, God bless Bobby Seals, when you see them say, I am a revolutionary, Sister Shirley Chisholm say, I am a revolutionary, that's because they're not really interested in playing pity pat games with folks like the DNC and folks like donors and folks like the blue checkerati on Twitter who know what's best for moving liberal politics forward. That's cool, and I think those people are good-hearted and good intentioned, but they really don't have a real window into the people that Howard Thurman described as those who stand with their backs against the wall at any given day, at any given geography in the world. And ain't no sense in me at my big age of playing around in politics unless I'm trying to put an eye towards them. I don't measure success in terms of how much money is in my bank account. I don't measure success in terms of how many races I won or lost. I measure my success in terms of my continued proximity to poor Black and brown children because they are the most vulnerable people